Clayton Ward woke up before sunrise, just as he did every weekday, but the air felt heavier than usual. The neighborhood of Huyton was still half asleep, with only the orange glow of streetlights stretching across empty pavements. Clayton moved quietly around his small kitchen, preparing his simple breakfast and checking the time on his phone. He liked routine. It made life predictable, controlled, safe. He believed nothing bad could happen in a place he had lived his entire life. But outside, something unfamiliar was already in motion, waiting patiently for him to step out of the door. A black hatchback had driven through the street earlier, its slow movement picked up by one of the council's CCTV cameras. The car didn't belong to anyone in the area, and people who passed through usually did so quickly. But this one circled the block once, then again, almost as if measuring the rhythm of the neighborhood. Its tinted windows prevented anyone from seeing inside, but the engine paused long enough near Clayton's house to catch attention, though no one that morning was awake to notice. Inside his home, Clayton zipped up his coat, unaware that someone had spent weeks learning the small habits he considered normal. He always left his house at the same time, always walked the same route, always stopped by the same corner shop before catching his bus. These actions felt harmless to him, but they had become a perfect timetable for someone with darker intentions. When he finally stepped outside, the cold air touched his face, and he pulled his backpack higher onto his shoulders. Birds were beginning to chirp lightly, and the quietness of the street seemed peaceful. Nothing looked strange, nothing felt out of place, and nothing hinted that danger was lurking so close. The black hatchback sat half hidden behind a parked van a short distance away, its engine silent, but its presence calculated. Clayton locked his door and started walking. His steps echoed lightly on the pavement, mixing with the soft morning wind. The world looked normal. A neighbor's curtains moved slightly. A cat sat near a garden fence, and the first bus of the morning rumbled far down the road. To Clayton, it was just another start to another ordinary day. But every movement he made was being watched. Someone inside that darkened car held a phone displaying a live map with a marker named after him. Someone else leaned forward slightly, studying the corner where they expected him to appear. As he approached the end of the street, another CCTV camera captured him adjusting his headphones and glancing up at the sky. The recording would later become one of the final clear moments before the tragedy. The camera also caught the black car's door opening just a fraction, a detail that would only be noticed during the investigation. Clayton didn't hear the quiet footsteps behind the car. He didn't see the person shifting their weight, preparing to act. He simply kept walking, believing the world around him was safe. In that final stretch toward the corner shop, he unknowingly walked deeper into a trap that had been waiting for him with perfect timing and cold patience. The ordinary morning he trusted so much was seconds away from becoming the most shocking moment Liverpool would soon witness. Clayton had never imagined that a simple work task could reshape the course of his life. At his job, he was known for being observant, reliable, and precise with paperwork. These qualities made him stand out, but they also made him notice things other employees ignored. The warehouse where he worked handled hundreds of deliveries every day, and Clayton was responsible for checking shipment logs and verifying that packages matched the recorded inventory. It was a dull routine, but he took pride in doing it correctly. What he didn't realize was that this routine brought him dangerously close to something hidden. Weeks before the ambush, Clayton found numbers in the cargo logs that didn't make sense. Certain containers were accounted for on paper but never physically seen in the warehouse. Some deliveries arrived without proper documentation. Clayton initially thought it was a clerical mistake. Mistakes happened all the time, and paperwork could get messy. But then he noticed the same employee linked to these irregularities, Reese Turner. The name kept appearing next to suspicious entries, and the signatures looked rushed, different, or sometimes incomplete. Clayton marked these discrepancies quietly, never considering the consequences of reporting them. Reese had a reputation for being unfocused and careless, but few knew about his connections outside the warehouse. He often met with people who didn't look like regular visitors, men who stayed in their cars outside the building, never entering, never speaking to management. Clayton didn't think much of it at first, because Reese seemed like a man who always had side hustles and odd friends. But once the shipment inconsistencies began to pile up, the pattern became more concerning. Clayton, following protocol, informed his supervisor privately. He believed he was doing the right thing. After all, the warehouse relied on honesty and accuracy. What he didn't understand was that honesty in the wrong place could expose dangerous truths. Reese was not just making errors. He was helping a small criminal group smuggle illegal items through the company's shipping system. The deliveries were disguised as regular cargo, mixed in with legitimate shipments. Clayton's report caused a quiet internal review, which Reese noticed long before anyone told him. By the time management looked into the logs, Reese had already informed the people he worked for. He told them someone had raised suspicion, someone who checked the numbers too carefully, someone who didn't mind questioning others. That someone was Clayton. The gang didn't react immediately. They spent days watching him, trying to understand if he was a threat or just an annoying employee doing his job. But when another irregular shipment was flagged, they assumed Clayton had dug deeper. In their world, a single person noticing too much could destroy everything. Eliminating him seemed easier than risking exposure. Unaware of any danger, Clayton continued living his routine life. Meanwhile, Reese panicked internally, knowing he had triggered something he couldn't control. He didn't want the situation to escalate, but the gang didn't operate on caution. They decided Clayton had become a problem and accidental witness who knew nothing yet saw too much. Their plan formed quietly, built around the predictable steps of a man who never imagined he was being targeted. The conflict Clayton never knew existed was already working against him, shaping the deadly ambush that awaited him on the streets of Huyton. The men planning the attack had spent weeks studying Clayton's movements, treating his routine like a blueprint for their operation. They started by learning exactly when he left his house each morning. One of the gang members used a delivery uniform to blend into the street and linger near nearby homes, pretending to check addresses while memorizing Clayton's schedule. Another member watched from a parked car farther down the road, logging the precise minute Clayton appeared. They repeated this surveillance for days, recording not just his timing but his habits, how long he stayed at the corner shop where he waited for the bus, which route he preferred, and even the way he reacted to cars passing by. Their preparation was patient and methodical. They didn't want to rush and risk leaving clues that would point back to them. The gang needed the attack to look swift and unplanned, something that would confuse investigators and delay suspicion. For them, the key to success was understanding Clayton better than he understood his own morning routine. Once they felt confident, they focused on selecting the location where the ambush would unfold. It needed to be somewhere with a quick escape route, minimal foot traffic, and blind spots that allowed them to move without being seen until the last moment. After scouting the area, they chose a stretch of Brookside Avenue, a quiet spot that Clayton crossed every morning. This section was surrounded by houses, but most residents were indoors at that hour. A narrow alleyway close to the main road provided an ideal hiding place for the shooter. The stolen black hatchback could be positioned near the alley, ready to accelerate away the moment the job was done. The area also had just enough CCTV coverage to capture Clayton, but not enough to clearly reveal the attackers. The gang considered this a perfect balance. Footage of the victim would ensure the attack generated fear, while the grainy angle on the suspects would slow the investigation. On the morning they chose, the gang prepared before dawn. The black hatchback was stolen the night before and wiped down to remove fingerprints. The shooter, masked and hooded, rehearsed the timing repeatedly in the alley. Another member, sitting in the driver's seat, kept the engine off to avoid drawing attention. He watched the corner carefully through the side mirror while holding a burner phone with a live location marker tracking Clayton's home. A lookout farther down the street sent a silent confirmation message the moment Clayton stepped outside. The air inside the car was thick with tension, each man breathing slowly and quietly as if listening for footsteps. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every movement had been planned. They waited for the exact second when Clayton would reach the narrow crossing point that left him exposed for a few meters. As Clayton approached, the shooter tightened his grip and positioned himself behind the shadow of the alley wall. The driver leaned forward, eyes fixed on the pavement. The lookout sent one final text, just a single word, confirming that everything was in place. Clayton, unaware of the eyes locked onto him, was seconds away from walking into the precise spot the gang had prepared. Their weeks of planning, watching, and calculating had led to this moment, the turning point where a simple routine would collide with a deadly scheme crafted in silence. Clayton stepped into the open stretch of Brookside Avenue, the morning sun just beginning to push through the gray Liverpool sky. The quiet street felt harmless, almost comforting, with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant sound of a bus engine humming along the main road. To him, it was simply another walk toward the corner shop. To the men watching him, it was the moment everything depended on. The shooter waited inside the narrow alley, hidden behind a wall stained by years of rain, standing completely still as Clayton came into view. His breathing was controlled, his stance steady. He had rehearsed this position many times in his mind, imagining every movement from the moment he stepped out of the shadows to the second he returned to the getaway car. Clayton walked with his usual pace, adjusting his backpack slightly, unaware that the alley beside him concealed the person who had been preparing for this exact second. A CCTV camera, mounted on a lamppost, pointed toward the pavement, recording the early morning stillness. Later, investigators would slow that footage down frame by frame, searching for clues. But at that moment, it captured only a man walking, calm and unsuspecting. As Clayton reached the midpoint of the crossing, the ambush unfolded in an instant. The shooter stepped out, quick and precise, raising the handgun with a calculated motion. There were no warnings, no hesitation. The silence of the morning was shattered in a heartbeat as the weapon fired. Clayton's body reacted before his mind understood what was happening. The force of the first shot made him stumble, and the second shot sent him collapsing onto the pavement. His backpack slid from his shoulder and hit the ground beside him, its contents shifting inside with a dull thud. The CCTV camera recorded everything in real time, the sudden blur of the attacker, the flash from the gun, the way Clayton's body fell. The footage would eventually spread across Liverpool, creating shock and fear among residents who had walked that same street countless times. People would watch it repeatedly, pausing and replaying, trying to understand how something so violent could happen so quickly. After firing the shots, the attacker sprinted back into the alley with practiced speed. The driver of the black hatchback already had the engine running. The shooter yanked the door open and jumped in, slamming it shut as the car screeched forward. Tires gripped the cold pavement as the vehicle accelerated toward the main road. Within seconds, it disappeared from the street, leaving behind only the faint smell of burnt rubber and the quiet hum of the city waking up. Nearby houses remained silent, their occupants still asleep or unaware. The entire attack had taken less than 10 seconds. Clayton lay motionless, the morning breeze brushing against him as the CCTV camera continued recording, unaware of the weight of what it had captured. A few minutes later, the first passerby would spot him and call emergency services, but the damage was already done. The gang's plan had unfolded exactly as they intended, swift, brutal, and executed with chilling precision. For investigators, this moment marked the beginning of a complicated chase. For the community, it marked a frightening reminder of how quickly life could change. And for the gang, it was the final step in a plan they believed would silence their problem forever, not knowing that the street and its cameras had witnessed more than they expected. The investigation into Clayton's shooting began almost immediately, with detectives arriving on Brookside Avenue within minutes of the emergency call. The street was cordoned off with yellow tape, and officers moved carefully around the scene, photographing everything from the scuffed pavement to the discarded backpack that had fallen beside him. Forensic teams worked meticulously, collecting shell casings, examining the trajectory of the bullets, and studying the CCTV footage that had captured the attack from a distance. The grainy images showed Clayton walking calmly, the sudden blur of a figure emerging from the alley, and the attacker sprinting back to the hatchback before speeding away. Each frame was studied repeatedly, but the suspect's identity remained a mystery. The masked shooter and the dark vehicle offered almost no clues, leaving detectives frustrated yet determined. While reviewing the evidence, officers noticed small details that others might have overlooked. A footprint in the mud near the alley suggested the shooter had worn heavy boots, leaving an imprint that could be compared to known criminal records. Tire tracks were documented, matching the width and tread pattern of the stolen hatchback seen on surveillance cameras across the neighborhood. But the most striking discovery came hours later when the abandoned car was found behind an industrial estate on the outskirts of Liverpool. The vehicle had been wiped clean, yet inside lay a wallet containing the ID of Reese Turner, the warehouse employee whose recent suspicious activity had intersected with Clayton's own discovery. It seemed almost too obvious, as if the attackers wanted the investigation to be temporarily misled. Detectives soon realized that Reese's disappearance before and during the shooting raised more questions than answers. He had vanished hours before the attack and had no confirmed alibi. This suggested he might have been used as a pawn, a convenient figure to absorb blame while the real mastermind remained hidden. Investigators began digging deeper, looking into Reese's connections, and discovered a complex web of criminal ties. Hidden communications, surveillance photos, and testimonies from minor offenders hinted at the presence of another figure orchestrating the ambush. Further examination revealed Brayden Holt, a lesser-known member of the gang, who had been quietly planning to take control of the operation for months. Unlike Reese, Brayden had a reputation for careful planning and manipulation. He had orchestrated the shooting to appear as a chaotic act while keeping himself removed from direct involvement. The wallet and the stolen car had been part of his deliberate attempt to mislead police, framing Reese as the scapegoat. Clayton's observant nature had unknowingly disrupted Brayden's scheme, forcing him to act before the shipment network could collapse. The more detectives uncovered, the more intricate the plot appeared. Each piece of evidence suggested that the attack was not random, but a carefully timed attempt to silence someone who had stumbled into the criminal world. Interviews with colleagues and witnesses revealed that Clayton had unknowingly been a threat, someone who could expose a hidden network that relied on discretion and intimidation. Every routine he had followed became a blueprint for danger, and every calculated move by the gang highlighted their chilling precision. By the end of the week, the investigation had shifted from focusing on Reese to identifying Brayden Holt as the mastermind. It became clear that the shooting was a premeditated act of control and revenge, designed to eliminate the perceived threat and maintain the gang's operations. What initially appeared as a simple street crime evolved into a revelation of manipulation, careful planning, and calculated deception, showing that in the criminal world, appearances can be deadly, and the truth often hides behind layers of lies.